Marcel Adler has 12 hours to perfect a dead man's signature, not just any signature. SS Hauptsturmführer Jürgen Stroop's personal flourish, the one he adds to transit documents, execution orders, and deportation lists with the casual authority of a man who signs death warrants between breakfast and lunch. Marcel sits in the basement of a bombed-out apartment building at 23 Mila Street, the Warsaw Ghetto walls 3 blocks north, and stares at the 3 Stroop signatures he managed to steal from a forged delivery manifest last week. 3 samples. That's all he has to learn: the precise pressure points, the subtle variations in downstroke angle, the exact rhythm of pen movement that distinguishes a rushed Stroop signature from a careful one. 3 samples to master the handwriting of a man who has signed deportation orders for 310,000 Jews, who will notice if even one forgery is imperfect, who employs a forensic document examiner specifically to catch forgers like Marcel. It's April 19, 1943. The gross action, the final liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto, begins in 48 hours. The Jewish underground has a plan, a desperate, impossible plan. Evacuate 4,300 children through forged transit documents claiming they're being transferred to labor camps in Trauniki. Get them past German checkpoints. Deliver them to Polish Catholic families who've agreed to hide them. Save them from Treblinka. The problem is the documents. They need Stroop's signature, his personal seal, his authentication mark that no German soldier will question because Hauptsturmführer Stroop commands the liquidation, and his authority is absolute. Marcel needs to forge 4,300 perfect signatures in 72 hours once the evacuation begins. That's one signature every 60 seconds, non-stop, for 3 days. Each one must be flawless. Each one must pass inspection by German guards who've seen Stroop's handwriting hundreds of times. Each one must be perfect or children die. Marcel's hand is shaking. That's bad. Forgers can't shake. The Leonardo da Vinci he copied for his thesis at Warsaw Academy of Fine Arts required 18 hours of steady hand work to reproduce the sfumato technique in the angel's face. No tremor, no hesitation, just perfect control translating original into replica. But Leonardo never signed deportation orders. Leonardo never commanded liquidations. And Marcel's reproduction of the Mona Lisa never determined whether 4,300 children lived or died. The basement smells like damp concrete and old books. Someone died here last month. Marcel can still see the bullet holes in the eastern wall, the dark stain on the floor where the body lay for 3 days before the Judenrat burial detail collected it. The Germans shot a family hiding here. Father, mother, 2 sons. Ages 8 and 11. The boys looked like the children Marcel is trying to save now. He was born in Krakow, 1915. His father taught classical literature at Jagiellonian University. His mother painted watercolors and sold them at market. Marcel showed artistic talent early. By age 12, he could copy any painting well enough that experts struggled to identify the forgery. His parents encouraged it, sent him to Warsaw Academy, best art school in Poland. Marcel specialized in Renaissance forgery, not criminal forgery, academic reproduction. Museums need copies for traveling exhibitions. Collectors want replicas of pieces they can't afford. Marcel became expert at copying Caravaggio's dramatic lighting, Botticelli's flowing drapery, Vermeer's photographic precision. His thesis, a perfect reproduction of Leonardo's Lady with an Ermine, earned highest honors. Professor Kowalski said Marcel had a gift for understanding the artist's intention, the psychology behind each brushstroke. That was 1938. Then Germany invaded. Then the ghetto was established. Then Professor Kowalski was shot during an action because someone informed that he was hiding Jewish manuscripts. Then Marcel's gift for understanding artistic intention became a tool for survival, forging ration cards, work permits, travel documents, anything that might keep someone alive one more day. But this is different. This isn't forging a simple stamp or copying a generic German officer's signature. This is Jürgen Stroop. The man is a perfectionist, reviews documents personally, has executed forgers who made mistakes, employs experts to detect fraud. Marcel studies the 3 sample signatures again, uses a magnifying glass borrowed from a jeweler who died 2 weeks ago. The jeweler's daughter gave it to Marcel before she was deported to Majdanek, said her father would want someone to use it for something that mattered. Stroop's signature has 7 distinct characteristics. First, the J starts with a sharp upstroke from below the baseline, then loops into the vertical with a slight rightward lean. The pressure is heavy at the base, light at the peak. Indicates confidence, authority, impatience. Second, the U dots are placed precisely 2.3 millimeters above the letter. Never random, always exact. Stroop was trained in Prussian precision. The dots matter. Third, the connecting stroke between Jürgen and Stroop is almost invisible. Most forgers make it too obvious. Stroop barely lifts his pen. The connection exists, but requires magnification to see. Fourth, the S in Stroop starts with a hook that's 0.8 meters longer than standard German handwriting. Personal idiosyncrasy. Probably learned it young, never corrected. Fifth, the double O letters have different pressure. First O is heavier, second O lighter. Suggests Stroop loses focus mid-signature, thinks about what comes next. Sixth, the final P has a descender that curves back under the signature, creating a subtle underlining effect. Ego marker. Stroop wants his name to stand out, to be remembered. Seventh, the signature angle is 7 degrees forward-leaning. Not 5, not 10, exactly 7. Marcel measured it 3 times to confirm. Master these 7 elements. Reproduce them 4,300 times without variation large enough to trigger suspicion, without variation small enough to suggest mechanical reproduction. Each signature must be human, unique, slightly different from the last, but all recognizably Stroop's handwriting. Marcel practices on a scrap of paper torn from a book about Renaissance painting techniques. Ironic. Learning to fake a Nazi's handwriting using paper from a book about art. First attempt. The J is too angular. Stroop's upstroke is sharper. Second attempt, the U dots are 2.5 millimeters above the letter. Too high. Stroop is more precise. Third attempt, the connection between names is too visible. Marcel can see the pen lift. Stroop never shows the mechanics. Fourth attempt, the S hook is correct, but the pressure is wrong. Too consistent. Stroop has heavy light variation. Fifth attempt, the double O letters are identical. Wrong. Stroop's focus shifts between them. Sixth attempt, the P descender doesn't curve back far enough. Less ego than Stroop displays. Seventh attempt, the angle is 5 degrees, not 7. Marcel's natural handwriting tends toward vertical. Must fight this instinct. Eighth attempt, better. Still not perfect. The J is right, the U dots are exact, the connection is nearly invisible. But something is wrong with the rhythm. The signature takes Marcel 4.3 seconds. The sample signatures show Stroop completes his in 2.7 seconds. Faster, more confident, less thinking. Marcel needs to stop thinking, needs to become Stroop, needs to inhabit the psychology of a man who signs death warrants without hesitation, who adds his personal flourish to documents ordering children to gas chambers, who takes pride in the precision of his handwriting even when that handwriting authorizes genocide. This is what Professor Kowalski taught him. To copy an artist, you must understand their soul. To forge Caravaggio, you must feel his violent intensity. To replicate Vermeer, you must see the world as crystallized light. To reproduce Leonardo, you must believe in the perfectibility of human form. To forge Stroop, you must become a man who kills with bureaucratic efficiency and signs his name with pride. Marcel closes his eyes, breathes, thinks about what he knows of Stroop from the Underground's intelligence reports. The Hauptsturmführer is 48 years old, born in Detmold, middle-class family. Father was a police official. Stroop joined the Nazi Party in 1932, rose through SS ranks through competence, not fanaticism. He's not ideological, he's professional. Views ghetto liquidation as a tactical problem requiring methodical solution. Signs documents quickly because efficiency matters, because each signature represents another step toward completion, because the work must be done and hesitation wastes time. Stroop doesn't hate Jews personally, he kills them professionally. The signature reflects this: fast, precise, impersonal, a bureaucratic act performed with Prussian exactitude. Marcel opens his eyes, picks up the pen, doesn't think about the mechanics, just channels the psychology. I am a Prussian professional. I sign documents efficiently. My handwriting reflects my competence. My authority is absolute. My signature is proof. Ninth attempt. The J flows from below the baseline with sharp confidence. The U dots appear exactly 2.3 above the letter, placed with unconscious precision. The connection between names is invisible without magnification. The S hook extends 0.8 mm, personal but unintentional. The double O letters show heavy then light pressure, focus, then drift. The P descender curves back proudly. The entire signature leans 7 degrees forward, pushing toward completion. Duration, 2.8 seconds. Close enough. Marcel compares his forgery to the sample, places them side by side under the jeweler's magnifying glass, studies the pressure variations, the ink distribution, the micro-tremors that show human hand movement. They're not identical. They can't be identical. Identical would suggest mechanical reproduction, would trigger forensic suspicion. But they're consistent. The variation is within human range. The psychology matches. The rhythm is right. This will work. Or 4,300 children will die because Marcel Adler couldn't perfectly fake a Nazi signature fast enough. Someone knocks on the basement door. 3 short raps. Pause. 2 long raps. Recognition code. Marcel covers the practice signatures with a cloth. Enter. The door opens. Sarah Rosenberg descends the stairs. She's 34 years old, worked as a nurse before the ghetto, now coordinates the underground's children evacuation network. She carries a canvas bag, sets it on Marcel's work table with a heavy thud. Sample documents, she says without preamble. 43 genuine transit papers signed by Stroop last month, stolen from the Umschlagplatz processing center. Guards didn't notice they're missing. Marcel opens the bag. Inside are 43 official SS transit documents, each bearing Stroop's signature, each authorizing prisoner transfer to Trauniki labor camp. These aren't forgeries. These are the real thing. These are what Marcel's copies must match. He spreads them across the table, studies the signature variations. Stroop signed these documents over several weeks, in different moods, at different times of day. Morning signatures are slightly more precise. Afternoon signatures show fatigue. Evening signatures become rushed. But the 7 core characteristics remain consistent. The psychological foundation doesn't change. Stroop is always Stroop, whether signing before breakfast or after midnight. These are perfect, Marcel says. With these samples, I can analyze pressure variations, can measure ink flow patterns, can build a psychological model precise enough to reproduce under interrogation pressure. You'll have 72 hours, Sarah says. The gross action begins April 21st at dawn. We need documents ready by April 20th midnight. That gives you from noon tomorrow 36 hours to forge 4,300 signatures. That's 1 signature every 30 seconds, continuously, without rest, without error. 30 seconds per signature is possible, but not continuously. My hand will cramp. Pressure variations will become obvious after 200 repetitions. Forensic examiners will detect the fatigue pattern. Then you rest in shifts. We have 3 other forgers. They'll handle the document body, letterhead, stamps, registration numbers. You only forge Stroop's signature. Can you do 1,500 signatures in 12 hours before hand fatigue becomes detectable? Marcel calculates. 1,500 signatures at 30 seconds each. That's 45,000 seconds, 750 minutes, 12.5 hours. Possible if he maintains rhythm, if the psychology stays consistent, if he doesn't think about what these signatures represent. I can do 1,500 in 12 hours, but I need breaks. 5 minutes every hour. Need to study sample signatures, need to reset the psychological state, can't let my natural handwriting bleed through. You'll have the breaks, but Marcel, Sarah's voice drops. She looks at the 43 genuine documents spread across his table. If even one signature is detected as forgery, the Germans will analyze all 4,300 documents. We'll find the pattern. We'll realize someone is evacuating children. They'll lock down the ghetto. The children won't get out. And they'll hunt the forger using forensic techniques we can't counter. Your handwriting will be in their database forever. Every document you touch for the rest of your life will be analyzed. If you survive the war, you'll never be safe. Marcel understands what she's not saying. Forging Stroop's signature 4,300 times creates a forensic record, a pattern, evidence that can be analyzed, compared, traced back. Even if Marcel survives the war, even if Germany loses, the forged documents remain. Criminal investigators, war crimes tribunals, Nazi hunters, all will examine these papers. We'll study the signatures. We'll identify the forger's unique characteristics hidden within the replicas. Marcel's artistic gift, his ability to perfectly channel another person's handwriting, will become his permanent liability. Every stroke of his pen leaves forensic evidence. Every forgery is a confession. But 4,300 children. "I'll do it," Marcel says. Sarah nods. Doesn't thank him. Thanks would be meaningless. This isn't heroism. This is calculation. 4,300 children versus one forger's future safety. The mathematics are simple. Materials arrive at noon tomorrow, Sarah says. High-quality paper, proper ink, official SS stamps. Everything you need. The other forgers are preparing the document bodies now. You focus on the signature. That's all that matters. Perfect Stroop 4,300 times. She leaves. The basement returns to silence. Marcel alone with 43 genuine Stroop signatures and the knowledge that he's about to forge 4,300 more. He practices through the night. Doesn't sleep, can't afford to sleep. Each practice signature brings him closer to perfect psychological channeling. By midnight, he's completed 300 practice forgeries. Compares them to the genuine samples under magnification. The variations are within acceptable human range. The pressure patterns match. The rhythm is consistent. At 0300 hours, his hand starts cramping. Marcel stops, flexes his fingers. Does hand exercises learn from a pianist who died during an action last winter? The pianist said hand cramps come from tension, not fatigue. Must relax into the movement. Must let the muscles flow. Marcel relaxes, breathes. At 0315 hours, he resumes practice. The cramping diminishes. At 0600 hours, dawn light filters through the broken basement window. Marcel has completed 800 practice signatures, lays them out in rows, studies the progression. The first 100 show slight hesitation, learning phase. Signatures 100-300 demonstrate consistency, mastery phase. Signatures 300-800 reveal automation, integration phase. He's not thinking about mechanics anymore. He's channeling Stroop directly, becoming the Hauptsturmführer for 2.8 seconds at a time. At 0900 hours, Sarah returns with a different woman. Older, maybe 50, carries a leather bag. "This is Dr. Helena Gorska," Sarah says. "Before the war, she was a forensic document examiner for Warsaw Police. She'll verify your forgeries." Dr. Gorska sets her bag on Marcel's table, removes a microscope, a set of precision measuring tools, reference documents about German SS paperwork standards. "Show me your best attempt," she says. Marcel produces signature number 784 from last night's practice session, hands it to Dr. Gorska. She examines it under the microscope for 6 minutes, measures the pressure variations with a tool Marcel doesn't recognize, compares the ink flow patterns to genuine Stroop samples. Finally looks up. The J upstroke is 0.2 millimeters too shallow. The second O in Stroop has 8% less pressure than authentic samples. The P descender curves 3 degrees less than Stroop's typical range. Marcel's stomach sinks. After 800 practice signatures, he's still not perfect, still detectable. However, Dr. Gorska continues, these variations are within natural handwriting fluctuation. No forensic examiner would flag this as forgery based on these characteristics alone. The signature would pass initial inspection. The problem is volume. When you forge 4,300 identical signatures, pattern analysis becomes possible. Examiners will measure statistical distribution of variations. If your forgeries cluster too tightly, if the variation is too consistent, that itself becomes suspicious. So I need to vary the signatures intentionally? No. Intentional variation creates artificial patterns. You need to reproduce Stroop's natural variation range. Morning Stroop is slightly more precise. Afternoon Stroop shows fatigue. Evening Stroop becomes rushed. You must forge not one Stroop signature, but 3 Stroop signatures, morning, afternoon, evening, and alternate between them in realistic patterns. Marcel hadn't considered this, thought one perfect Stroop would be sufficient. But Dr. Gorska is right. Humans don't sign identically 4,300 times. Humans show fatigue patterns, mood variations, time of day effects. To forge Stroop convincingly, Marcel must forge Stroop's entire psychological range. I need more time, Marcel says. Need to analyze the 43 genuine samples for temporal patterns. Need to identify which signatures Stroop signed in morning versus evening. Need to build 3 distinct psychological models. You have until noon, Dr. Gorska says. The materials arrive in 3 hours. The forging begins at 1300 hours. You either master 3 Stroops by then, or we proceed with 1 Stroop and accept the forensic risk. She leaves her equipment, the microscope, the measuring tools, the reference documents. Marcel spends the next 3 hours performing statistical analysis on 43 Stroop signatures. He groups them by date and estimated time of day based on document timestamps. Creates 3 categories: morning Stroop, 0600 at 1100 hours, afternoon Stroop, 1100, 1700 hours, evening Stroop, 1700, 2300 hours. Morning Stroop characteristics: 6% higher pressure on J upstroke. U dots precisely 2.3 above letter with minimal deviation. Connection between names virtually invisible. Higher consistency overall. Fresh focus. Afternoon Stroop characteristics: pressure on J upstroke drops 4% from morning. U dots maintain precision but show 0.1 millimeters more variation. Connection between names becomes slightly more visible. Focus degrading. Evening Stroop characteristics: pressure on J upstroke drops another 5% from afternoon. U dots lose precision, ranging 2.1 to 2.5 millimeters above letter. Connection between names clearly visible under magnification. Significant focus degradation. Speed increases as Stroop rushes to complete paperwork before day's end. 3 distinct Stroops. 3 psychological states. Marcel must channel all 3 and rotate between them in realistic time distribution patterns. At 1200 hours exactly, Sarah returns with 2 men carrying wooden crates. They unload 5,000 sheets of official SS letterhead stolen from German administrative offices, 16 bottles of proper German blue-black ink smuggled from a sympathetic Polish chemist, and official transit document stamps stolen from Umschlagplatz. The document templates are ready, Sarah says. Herman and David have been preparing bodies for 3 days. All you need to do is add Stroop's signature to 4,300 documents. You have 72 hours. Marcel looks at the stack. 4,300 documents, each requiring perfect Stroop signature, each representing a child's life, each creating forensic evidence that will haunt him forever. I'm ready, he says. And he genuinely believes it. Has channeled 3 distinct Stroops, has mastered the psychological variations, has practiced 800 signatures, has tools and materials, has 72 hours. What Marcel doesn't know yet, what none of them know, is that SS Hauptsturmführer Jürgen Stroop has just ordered a comprehensive audit of all transit documents issued in the past month, has noticed irregularities in registration number sequences, has suspected document forgery and assigned forensic examiners to analyze signature authenticity. The audit report will be completed in 68 hours, 4 hours before Marcel finishes forging the 4,300th signature, 4 hours before 4,300 children attempt to evacuate using forged documents, 4 hours before Stroop's forensic examiners identify the forgery pattern and alert checkpoints to detain anyone carrying transit papers with suspicious signature characteristics. But Marcel doesn't know this yet. At 1300 hours on April 20th, 1943, Marcel Adler picks up his pen, channels Morning Stroop, and signs the first of 4,300 death warrants that will become life certificates if his forgery is perfect, and death sentences if his hand betrays even the slightest deviation. The first signature takes 2.7 seconds. He has 4,299 more to go, and 71 hours, 59 minutes, 57 seconds to complete them before Stroop's audit reveals that someone in the Warsaw Ghetto has become very, very good at faking the Hauptsturmführer's handwriting. Marcel Adler's hand stops shaking after signature number 247. That's the moment when muscle memory overrides conscious thought, when the psychological channeling becomes automatic, when Morning Stroop flows through Marcel's pen without requiring deliberate intent. His fingers have learned the exact pressure variations, the precise rhythm, the unconscious micro-adjustments that distinguish authentic handwriting from mechanical reproduction. It's 1840 hours on April 20th, 1943. Marcel has been forging continuously for 5 hours and 40 minutes. The basement at 23 Mila Street smells like ink and sweat and the fear that seeps from walls that have witnessed too much death. His right hand aches, not cramping yet, but the deep muscle fatigue that warns of impending failure. The pianist who taught him hand exercises said fatigue comes in waves. Push through the first wave and the second is manageable. Collapse during the first wave and you're finished. Marcel pushes through. Signature 248. Morning Stroop, 6% higher pressure on J upstroke. U dots exactly 2.3 above the letter. Duration, 2.6 seconds. Signature, 249. Morning Stroop, maintaining consistency. Duration, 2.7 seconds. Signature 250. Morning Stroop, slight variation in P descender curve, 0.4 degrees less than average, within natural range. Duration, 2.8 seconds. Sarah Rosenberg descends the basement stairs at 1855 hours, carries a tin cup of water and a piece of dark bread, sets them beside Marcel's work table without interrupting his rhythm. He's learned to eat between signatures. 3 seconds to sign, 2 seconds to set down pen, 1 second to grab bread, 2 seconds to chew, 1 second to pick up pen. Repeat. You're at 250, Sarah says, watching him work. That's 17% of your target for today. You need 1,500 by midnight. That's 6 hours, 15 minutes remaining, 1,250 more signatures, 1 every 18 seconds. Marcel doesn't respond. Can't respond. Speaking disrupts the psychological state. Morning Stroop doesn't pause for conversation. Morning Stroop signs efficiently, moves to next document, maintains productivity. Marcel must embody this mindset completely, or the forgeries will betray hesitation, uncertainty, the microscopic tells that forensic examiners detect under magnification. Sarah understands, leaves the food, returns upstairs. Signature 251 through 400. Morning Stroop maintaining perfect consistency. By signature 400, Marcel's hand is operating independently of conscious control. His mind drifts while his fingers continue their precise choreography. He thinks about his thesis at Warsaw Academy of Fine Arts, the Leonardo reproduction that took 18 months. Professor Kowalski examining the finished piece for 40 minutes before declaring he couldn't identify which was original and which was copy. "You have a gift, Marcel," Kowalski had said. "You don't just copy technique, you channel the artist's soul. When you painted this angel's face, you became Leonardo. That's not forgery, that's resurrection." Marcel wonders what Kowalski would say about this, about channeling a Nazi's handwriting to save Jewish children, about resurrection in service of survival, about art as weapon instead of beauty. Kowalski died in March 1942, shot during an action for hiding manuscripts. Marcel never got to ask him whether artistic gifts come with moral obligations, whether the ability to forge perfectly makes you responsible for forging redemption when genocide is the alternative. At 1942 hours, Marcel transitions to afternoon Stroop. He's completed 450 morning signatures, now must shift psychological state to match Stroop's midday fatigue pattern. Pressure on J upstroke drops 4% from morning baseline. U dots maintain precision but show 0.1 mm more variation. Connection between names becomes slightly more visible under magnification. The transition is difficult. Marcel's hand wants to continue morning pattern. Muscle memory resists the change. He forces the adjustment, makes it conscious again for 20 signatures until the new pattern embeds. Signature 4521, afternoon Stroop, pressure adjusted. Duration 2.9 seconds, too slow. Signature 452, afternoon Stroop, pressure correct, speed improved. Duration 2.7 seconds, better. Signature 453, afternoon Stroop, flowing naturally now. Duration 2.8 seconds, perfect. By signature 500, afternoon Stroop has replaced morning Stroop in Marcel's muscle memory. He's inhabiting Hauptsturmführer Stroop at 1300 hours, slightly tired, focus degrading, but still precise enough to sign death warrants with bureaucratic efficiency. At 21:15 hours, Dr. Helena Gorska returns. Doesn't speak, just collects signatures 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500. Takes them to her makeshift analysis station in the corner. Examines each under microscope. Measures pressure variations with precision tools. Compares to genuine Stroop samples. Marcel continues forging while she works. Signature 501, 502, 503. Can't stop, can't break rhythm. Every pause is a signature not completed. Every distraction is a child who might not escape. At 2134 hours, Dr. Gorska speaks. Signature 100 has J upstroke pressure that's 0.3 mm shallower than acceptable morning Stroop range. Signature 300 shows U dot placement 2.4 mm above letter, outside Stroop's typical precision. Signature 500's P descender curves 4 degrees less than afternoon Stroop baseline. Marcel's stomach clenches. 3 signatures out of 500 are detectably wrong. That's 0.6% failure rate. Across 4,300 signatures, that's 26 forgeries that will fail forensic analysis. 26 children who will be detained at checkpoints. 26 documents that will trigger comprehensive investigation. However, Dr. Gorska continues, reading his fear. All 3 variations are within extreme natural range. Stroop himself occasionally produces signatures with these characteristics, perhaps 2 to 3% of the time. A forensic examiner conducting routine inspection would not flag these as suspicious. The problem emerges only with statistical analysis. If German examiners analyze all 4,300 signatures and find variation distribution doesn't match Stroop's natural pattern, that becomes evidence of systematic forgery. So I need to intentionally produce more outliers? No, you need to reproduce Stroop's natural statistical distribution. His genuine signatures show 2 to 3% extreme variations. Your forgeries show 0.6% extreme variations. You're too consistent, too perfect. Ironically, your skill is what makes the forgeries detectable. This is the nightmare scenario. Marcel's artistic gift, his ability to channel Stroop perfectly, is too good. Real humans have bad days. Real humans make mistakes. Stroop occasionally signs documents while distracted, angry, rushed. Those signatures show extreme variations. Marcel's forgeries don't capture this randomness because Marcel is focused, deliberate, channeling ideal Stroop instead of realistic Stroop. How do I fix this? Marcel asks, still signing. Signature 512, 513, 514. Can't stop even for this conversation. You must occasionally forge Stroop badly. Perhaps 3% of signatures should have deliberate flaws. Pressure too heavy, dots misplaced, descender wrong angle. This creates statistical distribution matching genuine Stroop variation range. But if German examiners notice those flawed signatures, they won't, because Stroop himself produces flawed signatures at same rate. The flaws won't trigger suspicion. The absence of flaws would. Marcel understands the mathematics. To forge perfectly, he must forge imperfectly, must intentionally introduce errors at statistically appropriate intervals, must become not just Stroop, but Stroop having bad days, Stroop making mistakes, Stroop being human. Starting with signature 550, Marcel begins intentionally degrading quality. Every 30th signature, he adds a flaw. Signature 550, pressure too heavy on J upstroke. Signature 580, U, dot placed 2.5 mm above letter. Signature 610, P descender curves wrong angle. Each flaw carefully calculated to match Stroop's natural error distribution. At 23:47 hours, Marcel completes signature 750. His hand is cramping severely now. The pianist's exercises aren't working anymore. The fatigue has progressed beyond technique into raw muscular failure. His fingers won't straighten fully. The pen feels like it weighs 5 kilograms. He stops, flexes his hand. The cramp worsens. Sharp pain radiates from his palm through his wrist. If he continues, the pain will affect his handwriting, will create pressure variations that don't match any Stroop pattern, will produce forgeries that scream, "Different forger took over here." Sarah appears at 2351 hours, sees Marcel holding his hand, sees the pain in his face. How many? 750. Need 750 more by midnight. 9 minutes remaining. Impossible. Can you do 50 more? Get to 800? That's better progress than the other forgers expected. Marcel looks at the 750 documents spread across his table, each bearing his forgery of Jürgen Stroop's signature, each representing a child who might live if the forgery holds, each creating forensic evidence that will identify Marcel as the forger forever. I can do 50 more, he says, but his hand betrays him. Signature 751 takes 4.2 seconds, too slow, too deliberate, pressure variations wrong. Signature 752 takes 3.9 seconds, still wrong. The cramping is affecting the psychology. Marcel can't channel Stroop when his hand is screaming. He stops at signature 755. I need 12 hours rest, need hand recovery time. If I continue, the forgeries become detectable. Sarah nods. 12 hours puts us at noon tomorrow, April 21st. The gross action begins at dawn. We're already hearing reports. German troops entering the ghetto, beginning house-to-house clearances. The evacuation must start by 1800 hours, April 21st, or the children won't reach safe houses before dark. You need 3,545 more signatures in 30 hours. The mathematics are brutal. 3,545 signatures in 30 hours. That's 118 signatures per hour, one every 30 seconds, for 30 consecutive hours, with hand cramps, with forensic perfection required, with children dying if Marcel's forgery fails. I'll do it, Marcel says. Because there's no alternative, because 755 children already have documents, because 3,545 children need him to continue. He sleeps for exactly 11 hours and 47 minutes. Wakes at 1134 hours on April 21st to the sound of German machine gun fire 3 blocks north. The gross action has begun. The final liquidation of Warsaw Ghetto is underway. Sarah is waiting when Marcel descends to the basement. Her face is ash gray. The Germans are moving faster than expected. They're clearing buildings systematically. We have maybe 8 hours before they reach this block. The evacuation must begin at 1600 hours. That's 4 hours, 26 minutes from now. We need at least 2,000 documents ready, enough to get the first group out. Can you do 1,245 signatures in 4 hours? 1,245 signatures in 240 minutes. 1 every 11.6 seconds. Continuous. No breaks. Impossible speed. I can do it, Marcel says, because the alternative is watching children die. He begins at 11:37 hours. Morning Stroop. No, it's afternoon now. Afternoon Stroop. Pressure adjusted. Focus degraded. Speed increased. The psychological channel opens immediately. Marcel's hand remembers the pattern from yesterday. Muscle memory is intact despite the sleep, despite the cramps, despite the machine gun fire getting closer. Signature 7:56. Afternoon Stroop, 2.7 seconds. Signature 7:57. Afternoon Stroop, 2.8 seconds. Signature 7:58. Afternoon Stroop, 2.6 seconds. Too fast, but acceptable. By signature 800, Marcel has achieved rhythm. The hand cramps are gone, replaced by a numb automaticity. He's not thinking anymore, not channeling consciously, just becoming. His hand is Stroop's hand. His signature is Stroop's signature. The distinction has collapsed. At 14:23 hours, after 437 continuous signatures, Marcel's hand begins bleeding. The pen pressure has worn through skin on his index finger where it grips the barrel. Blood smears signature 1,293, ruins it. He wipes his finger on his shirt, continues with signature 1,194. The bleeding worsens. By signature 1,250, there's blood on every document. Marcel realizes with sick horror that blood is forensic evidence, DNA evidence, evidence that will identify him definitively if German examiners test it. But there's no time to stop, no time to bandage. The evacuation begins in 97 minutes. Children are depending on these signatures. At 15:17 hours, Marcel completes signature 2,000. He's done it. 2,000 perfect Stroop signatures in less than 4 hours. His hand is destroyed, bleeding, cramping, barely functional. But 2,000 children have documents. Sarah collects them immediately. The first group evacuates at 1600 hours, 300 children with forged papers. They'll go to 3 different checkpoints. If all 3 checkpoints accept the documents, we proceed with full evacuation. If any checkpoint detects forgery, we abort. Marcel watches her leave with his forgeries, with his blood literally on the documents, with forensic evidence that will identify him forever. If this fails, if German examiners analyze the blood, Marcel's DNA becomes part of Nazi criminal databases. He'll never be safe, never be anonymous, never escape the consequences of this forgery. At 1600 hours, Marcel sits alone in the basement and listens. Machine gun fire continues 3 blocks north. German soldiers shouting orders. Jewish families being dragged from apartments. The familiar sounds of actions, of liquidations, of genocide proceeding with bureaucratic efficiency. And somewhere in that chaos, 300 children are approaching German checkpoints with documents bearing Jürgen Stroop's forged signature and Marcel Adler's blood. At 16:47 hours, a runner arrives. Young boy, maybe 12, gasping from sprinting. First checkpoint, Lesno Street. Guards accepted documents. All 87 children passed through. No questions. Marcel's heart hammers. 87 children saved. But 2 checkpoints remaining. At 17:12 hours, another runner. Second checkpoint, Jezia Street. Guards inspected documents carefully. One guard noticed signature looked slightly different from usual Stroop, called supervisor. Supervisor compared to reference signature on file. Decided variation was within acceptable range. All 104 children passed through. One guard noticed, almost triggered investigation, but the forgery held. Morning Stroop's precision was sufficient, but it was close, terrifyingly close. At 17:39 hours, third runner. This one is older, a woman Marcel recognizes from the underground courier network. Her face is wrong, too pale, too frightened. Third checkpoint, Zamenhof Street. Guards detained the group. Something about the signatures. They're bringing in a forensic examiner from SS headquarters. He's analyzing the documents now. If he identifies forgery, all 109 children will be executed on sight. And they'll lock down the entire ghetto. No one gets out. Marcel's blood turns to ice. The forgeries have been detected. A forensic examiner is analyzing them right now, examining the signatures under microscope, measuring pressure variations, comparing to genuine Stroop samples, discovering that someone has become very, very good at faking the Hauptsturmführer's handwriting. How long until the examiner completes analysis? Marcel asks. Maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour. The children are being held in a holding area. Armed guards. If the examiner confirms forgery, executions begin immediately. Sarah Rosenberg appears at the basement entrance. Her face carries the weight of impossible decisions. We have two options. Abort the evacuation now, save 2,300 children who still have documents but haven't attempted to leave. Or continue and hope the examiner makes a mistake, doesn't detect the forgery, lets the 109 children through. What happens if the examiner confirms forgery? Marcel asks. The Germans will realize someone is forging Stroop's signature. They'll alert all checkpoints. They'll analyze every transit document in the ghetto. They'll find the 2,000 signatures you've completed. They'll execute everyone associated with forged papers, all 2,300 children, all the adults hiding them, everyone. The mathematics are clear. Abort now. 2,300 children remain hidden but can't evacuate, will likely die when Germans clear the ghetto. Continue. 109 children either pass through or get executed, but outcome determines fate of 2,300 others. Expected value of abort. 2,300 children survive liquidation. Probability 12%. Most will die in ghetto clearing. Expected value of continue. 109 children pass or die, 50-50, plus 2,300 either evacuate or execute, depending on examiner decision. But these aren't numbers. These are children. Real children with names and faces and futures that depend on whether Marcel Adler's forgery of Jürgen Stroop's signature is perfect enough to fool an expert examiner under microscope analysis. We continue, Marcel says. The forgery will hold. He doesn't believe this. The forgery had flaws. He intentionally introduced them to match statistical distribution. One of those flaws might be the signature the examiner is analyzing, might be the evidence that condemns 2,409 children. But the alternative is giving up, hiding 2,300 children in the ghetto while Germans conduct house-to-house clearances. Hoping children can hide successfully until liberation. Probability of success, near zero. At least this way, some children have a chance. At 18:23 hours, the woman returns, moves faster this time, not sprinting but walking quickly, deliberately. Her face is different, still pale but not terrified. Shocked instead, disbelieving. The examiner approved the documents, she says. Spent 47 minutes analyzing 3 signatures under microscope, compared to reference samples, measured everything, then declared the signatures authentic, said they showed normal Stroop variation patterns, ordered the guards to release the children. Marcel can't breathe, can't process this. The forensic examiner, a trained expert, a specialist employed specifically to detect forgeries, examined Marcel's work under microscope for 47 minutes and declared it authentic. The forgery held. All 109 children passed through. Total evacuated, 300 children through 3 checkpoints. Continue the evacuation, Sarah orders. We have confirmation the forgeries work under expert examination. Marcel, I need 2,245 more signatures. Can you do it? Marcel looks at his destroyed hand, at the blood still seeping from his index finger, at the cramps that make every movement agony, at the 2,245 documents that need Stroop's signature in the next 12 hours before the Germans reach this building. "I can do it," he says, and he does. From 1830 hours, April 21st, to 0630 hours, April 22nd, Marcel Adler forges 2,245 signatures, one every 17.4 seconds, for 12 continuous hours. His hand stops bleeding around signature 2,800, not because it healed, but because the nerve endings died. The cramps become constant, a background scream his brain learns to ignore. By signature 3,500, Marcel's hand is operating purely on muscle memory. He's lost conscious control. The hand signs itself while Marcel's mind drifts through memories of Warsaw Academy, of Professor Kowalski praising his Leonardo reproduction, of his mother's watercolors sold at market, of a world before genocide made forgery a tool of survival instead of artistic expression. At 0634 hours on April 22nd, Marcel completes signature 4,300, the final forgery, the last document, the 4,300th reproduction of Jürgen Stroop's personal signature. He sets down the pen. His hand won't straighten. The fingers remain curved in writing position, frozen in the shape of Stroop's handwriting, permanently damaged from 4,300 repetitions of channeling a Nazi's bureaucratic authority. Sarah collects the final documents. The evacuation continues through today and tomorrow. By April 23rd, all 4,300 children should be in safe houses. Catholic families across Warsaw, hidden in convents, farms, private homes, each with forged identity papers declaring they're Polish Catholics, each with your signatures making them disappear into documents. Marcel wants to feel triumph, wants to feel relief, instead feels only exhaustion and the terrible knowledge that his hand will never heal properly, will always carry the shape of Stroop's signature, will be permanent forensic evidence of what he did. "Rest now," Sarah says. "You've done what no one else could do. You've made 4,300 children invisible." But Marcel knows the truth. He hasn't made them invisible. He's made them forgeries, living forgeries. Children whose existence depends on documents that will be analyzed forever. Documents that contain his blood, his DNA, his artistic fingerprints hidden in microscopic pressure, variations that future forensic examiners might detect. The evacuation proceeds exactly as planned. Over 48 hours, 4,300 children pass through 8 different checkpoints using Marcel's forged transit papers. German guards inspect each document. 3 more forensic examiners analyze suspicious signatures. All declare them authentic. All approve passage. By April 24th, 4,178 children are safely hidden with Catholic families across Poland. 22 children were killed during the evacuation, not because forgeries failed, but because they were caught in random violence, street fighting between Jewish resistance and German soldiers. But 4,178 survived. 4,178 children who should have died in Treblinka are alive because Marcel Adler became very good at faking Jürgen Stroop's handwriting. On April 25th, the Germans complete liquidation of Warsaw Ghetto, burn the remaining buildings, execute the last resistance fighters. The ghetto ceases to exist. Marcel escapes through the sewers 3 days before the final liquidation, joins a group of survivors hiding in forests outside Warsaw. His hand never fully recovers. The fingers remain partially curved. He can hold a pen, but can't write normally. Can't paint, can't draw. His artistic gift, the ability that saved 4,178 children, is destroyed by the act of saving them. In September 1944, Soviet forces liberate Warsaw. Marcel emerges from hiding, discovers that of the 4,278 evacuated children, 3,147 survived the war, hidden successfully, protected by Catholic families who never revealed their identities. 431 children were discovered by the Germans and executed. The families hiding them were also executed. Marcel learns their names, memorizes them, carries them like signatures he forged but couldn't complete. 431 children whose documents passed forensic inspection but who died anyway because war doesn't care about perfect forgeries. In 1946, the Nuremberg trials examined Nazi documents from the Warsaw Ghetto liquidation. Forensic experts analyzed transit papers used during the evacuation. They discover something extraordinary. 4,300 documents bearing Jürgen Stroop's signature that show unusual statistical distribution patterns. The signatures are too consistent, too precise. Variations cluster too tightly. The forensic experts conclude these signatures are forgeries, masterful forgeries, the best they've ever analyzed, but forgeries nonetheless. They also find blood evidence on 1,107 documents. Test the DNA. Identify it as belonging to an unknown individual. Create a forensic profile. Store it in war crimes databases. Marcel Adler's DNA becomes evidence. Evidence that will identify him forever. Evidence that proves he was the forger. But the Allies don't hunt him, don't prosecute. Instead, they recognize what the forgeries represented. 4,300 children evacuated using fake papers. 3,147 survivors. The largest successful document forgery operation of the war. In 1947, a Polish war crimes investigator contacts Marcel, wants to interview him about the forgeries. Marcel meets with him in a small cafe in Warsaw. "We know you created the forged Stroop signatures," the investigator says. "Your DNA is on the documents. We've analyzed your handwriting samples. The forensic evidence is conclusive." Marcel waits for arrest, for prosecution, for punishment. "We're not here to prosecute you," the investigator continues. "We're here to document what you did, for the historical record, so people will know that while Germans used documents to order genocide, one forger used documents to prevent it." Marcel tells him everything. The 800 practice signatures, the 3 Stroops, morning, afternoon, evening, the deliberate flaws introduced to match statistical distribution, the bleeding hand, the 4,300 repetitions, the psychological channeling of a man who signed death warrants with bureaucratic efficiency. "One question," the investigator asks. "When you were forging Stroop's signature 4,300 times, becoming him psychologically, channeling his handwriting, did you ever forget who you were? Did Stroop's psychology ever replace yours?" Marcel thinks about this for a long time, about the moment after signature 247 when muscle memory took over, about the 12-hour session when his hand signed independently while his mind drifted, about the permanent curve in his fingers that matches Stroop's writing angle. "Yes," Marcel admits. "For those 72 hours, I became Jürgen Stroop. My hand was his hand. My signature was his signature. To forge perfectly, I had to stop being Marcel Adler and become the man I was forging. That's the cost of perfect mimicry. You lose yourself in the process." "And after, did you get yourself back?" Marcel looks at his damaged hand, at the fingers that won't straighten, at the permanent shape of Stroop's signature embedded in his anatomy. "No," he says quietly. "Part of me is still Jürgen Stroop, will always be Stroop. When I saved those children, I did it by becoming the man who would have killed them. That's the equation. That's the price. You can't forge the devil's signature without becoming a little bit devil yourself." The investigator publishes his report in 1948. The Stroop Forgeries, How One Artist Saved 3,147 Children by Mastering a Nazi's Handwriting. The report becomes required reading at Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial. Marcel Adler becomes famous, recognized as a hero. He hates it. Because the report doesn't mention the 431 children whose perfect forgeries didn't save them. Doesn't mention that Marcel's hand is permanently destroyed. Doesn't mention that when Marcel closes his eyes, he still sees Stroop's signature flowing from his pen, still feels the psychological channeling, still becomes the Hauptsturmführer for 2.8 seconds at a time. In 1952, Marcel receives a letter from New York, from a woman named Rachel Hoffman. She's 15 years old, Was 9 when she evacuated the ghetto using a forged transit document. Wants to thank the forger who saved her life. Marcel writes back, tells her he's glad she survived. Doesn't mention the cost. Doesn't mention the nightmares where he signs death warrants with perfect efficiency. Doesn't mention that he can never paint again because his hand won't work properly, because his artistic gift was consumed by the act of forging salvation. Rachel writes back. Says she's studying at Columbia University, wants to become a painter, asks if Marcel would teach her. Marcel agrees, travels to New York in 1953, meets Rachel. She's brilliant, talented, shows the same instinct for understanding artistic psychology that Marcel had at her age. He teaches her everything he knows, except forgery, refuses to teach her how to channel another artist's handwriting. That skill is too dangerous, too costly. Better to let it die with him. Over the next 20 years, Marcel teaches 47 Holocaust survivors who want to become artists. Most are children he saved with forged documents. They all ask the same question, "Will you teach us to forge?" He always says no, always explains, "Forgery saved your lives, but destroyed mine. Learn to create, not replicate. Learn to be yourselves, not channels for others. The world needs originals, not perfect copies." In 1973, Marcel is invited to Yad Vashem to speak about the forgeries. He's 58 years old. His hand is worse, arthritis compounding the original damage. He can barely hold a pen, certainly can't write, can't sign his own name without pain. During the speech, someone asks, "Do you regret forging the signatures? Do you regret becoming Stroop?" Marcel considers the question carefully, thinks about the 3,847 survivors, about Rachel Hoffman, now a successful painter in New York, about the 46 other students he taught, about their children and grandchildren who exist because Marcel forged 4,300 signatures in 72 hours. "I regret the necessity," Marcel says. "I regret that the world required me to become Jürgen Stroop to save children from Jürgen Stroop. I regret that my artistic gift, the thing that made me most human, had to be used to channel a man who committed genocide with bureaucratic efficiency. But do I regret saving 3,147 lives? No. I would do it again, would forge every signature, would destroy my hand again, would become Stroop again. Because the mathematics are simple. One damaged hand versus 3,847 lives. The equation works, even if the cost is terrible. What about the 431 who died despite perfect forgeries? This question breaks something in Marcel. He spent 30 years trying not to think about them, about children whose documents passed every forensic test but who died anyway, about perfection that wasn't enough. "I remember their names," Marcel says quietly. "All 431. I memorized them. Carry them the way I carried Stroop's signature for 72 hours. They haunt me more than the forgeries, because I did everything perfectly and they died anyway. That's the real cost, not the damaged hand, not the nightmares, but the knowledge that perfection doesn't guarantee salvation. Sometimes children die despite flawless forgeries. Sometimes evil wins despite perfect resistance." Marcel Adler dies in 1979 at age 64. Cancer. The same year Jürgen Stroop dies in Polish prison, executed for war crimes. The man and his forger die within months of each other, forever connected by signatures that saved lives and destroyed souls. At Marcel's funeral, 847 people attend. Most are Holocaust survivors or their descendants. People who exist because Marcel became Stroop for 72 hours. During the eulogy, Rachel Hoffman, now Rachel Hoffman Adler, having taken Marcel's name in honor, speaks. "Marcel Adler taught me that art is about creation, not replication, that the highest purpose of artistic skill is not to copy beauty, but to forge salvation. He saved 3,147 children by destroying his ability to create art. He gave up being an artist to become a forger. And in doing so, he created the most important work of his life, 3,147 living masterpieces who survived because he understood that sometimes perfect forgery is more valuable than original creation. In 1995, the Polish government opens its wartime forensic archives. Researchers discover 4,300 transit documents from Warsaw Ghetto bearing Jürgen Stroop's forged signature. They conduct comprehensive analysis using modern techniques unavailable in the 1940s. The analysis reveals something extraordinary. Marcel's forgeries are so perfect that even with modern forensic equipment, experts can't definitively prove they're fake. The psychological channeling was so complete, the artistic replication so precise, that Marcel didn't just copy Stroop's handwriting, he temporarily became Stroop's hand. The researchers also find Marcel's blood on 107 documents. Extract DNA. Confirm it matches samples from Marcel's body. But they discover something else. The blood contains elevated stress hormones. Cortisol levels 400% above normal. Adrenaline levels suggesting extreme fear. The blood itself is forensic evidence of the psychological cost. Evidence that while Marcel's hand signed with Stroop's confidence, his body was screaming with terror. In 2003, a doctoral student in forensic document examination chooses Marcel's forgeries as her dissertation topic. She analyzes all 4,300 signatures, measures every microscopic detail, compares to genuine Stroop samples using computer analysis. Her conclusion: the Adler forgeries represent the highest achievement in document forgery ever documented. The forger didn't just replicate handwriting mechanics, he replicated the psychological state of the original signer. Modern forensic techniques can detect mechanical forgeries with 99.9% accuracy. But psychological forgeries remain undetectable because they are, in every meaningful sense, authentic. Marcel Adler didn't forge Jürgen Stroop's signature. He temporarily became Jürgen Stroop and signed 4,300 documents as that person. This is not forgery. This is psychological resurrection. In 2019, the last surviving child evacuated with Marcel's forged documents dies. Sarah Rosenthal, age 85, formerly Sarah Rosenberg, the woman who coordinated the evacuation, who brought Marcel the 43 genuine Stroop samples, who watched him forge 4,300 signatures in 72 hours. Before dying, she gives an interview. Is asked, "What do you remember most about Marcel Adler?" "His hand," she says. After he finished the last signature, his hand wouldn't open. The fingers stayed curved in writing position, frozen in the shape of Stroop's handwriting. We had to massage his hand for 20 minutes to get the fingers to straighten, and even then they never fully recovered. For the rest of his life, Marcel's hand carried the shape of the man he forged. That's what people don't understand. When you channel someone completely enough to forge them perfectly, part of them stays in you forever. Marcel saved 3,147 children, but he paid for it by carrying Jürgen Stroop in his hand until he died. In 2025, the 4,300 forged transit documents are designated UNESCO World Heritage Documentary Artifacts. Protected, preserved, studied by forensic experts, historians, and artists worldwide. They represent the intersection of art and survival, of forgery and salvation, of one man's willingness to destroy himself to save others. The documents still show Marcel's blood, still carry his DNA, still contain forensic evidence of the 72 hours when a Polish art student became a Nazi officer just long enough to save children from the death camps that officer commanded. And somewhere in whatever comes after death, Marcel Adler and Jürgen Stroop exist in permanent connection, the forger and the forged, the artist and the monster, the man who saved children and the man who killed them, forever linked by signatures that were simultaneously authentic and fake, salvation and damnation, perfect art and terrible necessity. Because some truths resist categorization, some achievements require becoming what you hate, some signatures save lives precisely because they're perfect forgeries of death warrants. And some hands never stop shaking, even 82 years after they signed the last document, because they remember being someone else's hand for 72 hours, and that memory is heavier than any burden should be.